What a lovely morning. I am back at Damson Farm, just on the outskirts of Bath. Last time I was here to lend a hand, it was high summer, but there is definitely a change in the season now. There's dew all over the ground and mist coming up in the valley, and of course, blackberries everywhere. But even though the summer may be behind us, there is still plenty to celebrate in an autumn garden. Wow, this looks so beautiful. I love this area anyway, with food and flowers all mixed together, but at this time of year you can really see the contrast of that. There's seed heads of things like the parsley and the fennel that are just looking really beautiful, but then also the flowers of the morning glory and the cosmos that look stunning in this low autumn light. Just so beautiful. I can't wait to explore. But here is what's coming up on today's programme. We meet a passionate entomologist.
Sorry, I have to rescue a bumblebee.
Who studies insects and their habitats.
Ooh, yes! I can see a garden tiger.
Nick takes a deep dive into the fascinating world of plant science, starting with colour.
So it's almost like it's kind of hung a mirror ball in the middle and gone, look at me!
Yeah, the flower's not there for very long. It needs to use as much bling as it possibly can.
In Kent, we visit a family who have created a garden that has become a beautiful sanctuary for their son.
So the garden's a space for Ireland to explore, and that's how it's been designed.
He loves pointing things out. What can you see?
Golden one.
Just giving us all an opportunity to see the garden through his eyes.
And we join Rekha as she gives us another masterclass on how to sow, grow, and of course cook our own produce.
When we open these jars in winter, that's when we'll be thankful of the season we've just had. That is the best thing homegrown can give you.
This garden's owner and designer is Alison Jenkins, and she's asked me to lend a hand with some seasonal jobs. Hi, Alison.
Hi, Frances.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Gosh, this is beautiful. What's this one?
This one's Mexican Star. Was one of my favourite ones to add to salads because the petals are really tasty.
I didn't know that. I've never eaten dahlia petals.
Do try one if you want
Sure.
to.
Look, I'll try one from here because hello, Twiggy. Yes,
just-
hello, Twiggy. I'll try one
Just
from
pull
here.
one off.
This isn't a perfect
Twig.
specimen. She wants some dahlia. Oh, it's nice.
Yeah.
It's not quite as peppery as a nasturtium, but it's
Got
all
a bite to it, hasn't it?
and a bit of sweetness. That's delicious. I never knew that. Were you just deadheading?
Yes, just to kind of keep it flowering. There's obviously lots of little buds still to go.
I think sometimes it can seem confusing which ones are the dead heads and which ones are the buds. But the dead heads have this distinctly pointy shape, whereas buds are very rounded. So if you're ever unsure, just check that shape. You can see it's absolutely covered in buds, isn't it?
And it's going to keep going for quite a long time now, which is great.
It just keeps going until the first frost.
Yeah, it will do, yeah. And this one's a really established one. When they're more established, they're more likely to get through a hard winter.
And do you keep them in the ground for the winter?
Yeah, I keep them in the ground and I mulch them, and generally that's been okay, unless we have like a really, really hard wet winter.
And you just use these ones for eating?
I tend to, because the petals drop, so they're not quite so good for cut flowers.
Okay. Do you have some that you do cut for the house, though?
Yeah.
Do you go and do some
Yeah.
cut flowering?
That would be nice, yeah.
Yeah, it would be. Do you use them a lot, cut flowers?
Yeah, I do like to bring flowers into the house. It just kind of brings quite a nice sort of energy, and actually it's just nice to see them close up as well.
But you have to, with any cut flowers, put them straight into water, don't you?
Yes.
But what you shouldn't do, really, and I've done here, is cut them when they're in bud, because some flowers open in a vase, but dahlias don't. The reason I've taken this is to get that long stem. There we go. They look so pretty, even in the jam jar.
Yeah, they're so cheerful, dahlias, aren't they? And they look so fresh at this time of year.
I love the colours too. Really, really pretty. Well, this is quite an impressive squash patch. That's amazing. It's all growing in compost, that's why. So this is composted hay mixed in with things like composted nettles, which gives feed for squashes. They love a lot of nutrients. Presumably also this compost is holding on to whatever rain we have had too, because they just look so incredibly healthy. So here we have one called Musqué de Provence. And look at it, it's absolutely enormous. It's so beautiful, the shape of it, it almost doesn't look real. But that one will turn orange if you leave it and we have plenty of sun going through the autumn. So as long as you pick that before the frost, you might just get a lovely orange colour. This one, on the other hand, can be picked now. This is a beautiful blue squash with a very thick and quite shiny skin. It's firm as well. I can't put my nail through it, so that shows it's ready. That one is called Oregon Homestead. That is a beautiful squash. This one is called Anne Schwartz Hubbard. And I've left quite a lot of stalk on there because it prevents the rot from setting into the squash. What needs to happen now is you put it somewhere sunny and warm, so maybe like a kitchen windowsill or something, for 2 weeks to cure it, and then it should store all through the winter. And that is such a good feeling, harvesting now food that will take you right through into the spring. And all grown on a compost heap, which is really lovely because it makes use of an otherwise slightly unsightly space. Now, although compost might not be the most beautiful part of the garden, it is absolutely teeming with life. All of us gardeners can do our bit to provide for insects. And for the curator of entomology in Edinburgh, that is a real passion.
If you just imagine 5 years ago, this was seeded lawn. This was just a monoculture of one grass species. But what we've got now is this mosaic of diversity. I'm Ashley Whiffen and I'm Curator for Entomology here at National Museums Scotland. We're currently out of the National Museums Collection Centre. It's in the north of Edinburgh and I'm sat in one of our grassland areas. So our day-to-day work in the natural sciences team is we're researching biodiversity. That's what we do. Sorry, I have to rescue a bumblebee. Look, buddy. Has been going on for about 5 years now. Back then, the site was so different. It was pockets of green space laced between our buildings, and it was just all very neatly manicured lawns. So we developed a management plan where we would still have the grass cut, but just not cutting everything. Now, compared to 5 years ago, it's pretty different. I mean, it couldn't be more different, actually. There's so much more colour and life on the site, and it's an absolute joy just to be outside on your lunch break. Some of the strips are quite small, and we have done nothing to enhance this bit here. Everything that you see in this patch has just come here naturally. We've got some bird's foot trefoil, we've got some yarrow, bit of dock, cockseye daisy. There's lots of skipper butterflies popping up as well, which I love. One of the best things is the orchids. So we have got lots of northern marsh orchids, common spotted orchid as well. These ones are still in flower, that's quite nice. When I first saw the orchids coming up, I was chuffed. All this floral diversity is obviously great for the insect life. We've got hawkweeds. There's often the word weed in some of these names, but weeds are just plants that we as humans have deemed to be in the wrong place. But they're native wildflowers and they're exactly what our pollinators and our native insects need. So we embrace the ragwort here. It is a native wildflower, supports over 100 different pollinators, and the iconic species linked to this plant is the cinnabar moth, and this is the very jazzy black and orange stripy caterpillar. Insects are incredible. They are so diverse, and for me that's one of the things that's most interesting. Their variety of form, their weird and wonderful life cycles and habits, they're just fascinating. Recent studies have shown that in the last 20 years we've lost 60% of our flying insects. That is terrible news for us. We need insects for so many things, and I think most people will think of pollinators. Of course they're important in the production of our food, but there are many, many other invertebrates and mammals and birds that feed on insects and rely on those insect populations. So when insect populations are down, that's bad news for a lot of other things. The place is hooching with red soldier beetles right now. It's probably the dominant beetle species on site at this time of year. Yeah, they're all over the thistleheads. Over the years, we've also been using a few different survey techniques to monitor the biodiversity on site. Ooh, yes! I can see a garden tiger. We've recorded a huge diversity of moths, which has been brilliant, and we have seen that increase and the composition of species change over the years. So each year we record new species. Just last week we had 9 new moth species. That's showing us the real positive impact of what we're doing. This is probably our most biodiverse patch, and this bit isn't all natural, we'll confess now. So there was a little bit of construction that was done on a pathway, and so there was an opportunity here with some overturned soil to plant a native Scottish wildflower mix. So that's what we did. We've got a lot of things in here like knapweed, yellow rattle, and it's really started to spread now. So that area is enhancing some of the surrounding parts of the meadow. You can see a lot of meadow browns and small skippers at the moment enjoying some of these flowers. Teasels are another recent addition, actually just this year. They're going to be providing a nice offering of seed when the time comes, and I'm looking forward to seeing the goldfinches perching on there. I think when people think about meadows, they're expecting these massive, like big, beautiful pictorial blooms and a sea of colour. But a true meadow isn't that at all. A true meadow will have about 50 to 80% grasses. And these grasses are really important. If we want to have those butterflies, we need to have the grasses that their caterpillars feed on. I think there must be a huge number of organisations that have the potential and the opportunity to do what we've been doing here. I would desperately encourage them to take action and do the same or do similar. It's especially important in our urban landscapes, in our cities, in our towns. There's great potential there to be linking up similar projects and creating green corridors so that our biodiversity, our insects, our birds can be navigating through this landscape. And we all need to be coming together to support biodiversity right now.
Isn't it lovely to see so much biodiversity where there was so little beforehand? Now, next week, the BBC is celebrating the power of nature in BBC's Wild About Nature Week. And you can get involved by getting outside and connecting with the natural world. To find out more, go to our website and follow the link to BBC Nature Week. This late on in the year, you wouldn't always expect to still be seeing wildflower meadow. Often it's cut in July or August, but here some has been left. And that does two things. Firstly, it creates lots more safe spaces for creatures and critters to hide and find refuge for longer, but also it allows some of the later summer species seeds to ripen and develop ready for collection, and that creates diversity. You'll have spring flowering meadows and summer flowering meadows, and of course all that diversity is better for the wildlife. This is knapweed, and I love this plant. It's really beautiful. Obviously it's gone to seed now, but when it's in flower, these are lovely purple flowers. It's a centuria, so very closely related to thistles. And this is the perfect day for collecting seeds because the sun is shining, it's dry, and that's the key thing, is keeping everything as dry as possible. That allows the seeds to be stored for longer. With every seed that you collect, there's always a slightly different method. And with these, the method is to pull off the tips, reveal the centre, and then give it a sort of a squeeze. Roll it through your fingers, and then the seeds fall out with quite a lot of chaff. So what you'll have to do is try to remove that chaff if you can. And with something like this, the best way is probably by just giving it a gentle blow. Which will leave you with just the seeds. And you can tell that they're ripe generally when they've gone brown. That's a good rule of thumb with most seeds. This is one of my absolute favourite flowers. It's wild carrot, or Queen Anne's lace. So they have that classic apiaceae flat top umbel flower. But I think the thing about this that I love so much is that when it's been pollinated, it begins to close up, and then it's called birds' nests. And often if you look inside these birds' nests, you'll see a little spider or something that's made a home in here. So there's just something really magical about that. And when the seeds are fully formed, they look like tiny little hedgehogs. And of course, this is wild carrot, so it doesn't really have an edible root. But for wildlife, it is incredibly valuable, both as a flower, as a seed for birds, and also as a place for little insect nests. There we go. Although I've collected them in the dry, this is not the final stage because they do need to be dried even more. So I'll take them all back, empty them out of their envelopes, put them on a piece of kitchen towel on a windowsill until they're fully dry, and then stick them back into an envelope. Store them over the winter somewhere cool and dark, and again dry, so that they're still viable for next spring when they're ready to be sown. Whilst you're thinking of saving your seeds, there is something really, really lovely about saving edible seeds, depending what kind of crops they are. So if they are F1 hybrids, which is the term we hear a lot, they're not usually good for saving. And the reason for that is because in order to get an F1 hybrid seed, those parents will have been cross-pollinated in very controlled conditions. So their offspring then will not necessarily have the same characteristics. So although they will grow, they won't necessarily be exactly what you wanted them to be. Whereas if you get heritage or heirloom seeds like this is called Brad's atomic grape, they're open pollinated and the seeds should come true to form. So it's a really good way of saving yourself a little bit of money, and just another way again of getting to know your plants. With the tomatoes though, there is a little bit of a process. It's not just gathering them and drying them. Firstly, you have to actually extract the seed. You'll see the seeds go around the centre. And what you need to do is you need to scoop out this jelly. The jelly itself is an inhibitor to seed germination. So the aim of this is to remove it from the seeds themselves. So get them all out and put them into either a jar or something where you can add water, because the water in time will soak the jelly away from the seeds and get them into a state where you can then dry and store them. There. What you can find is if you keep saving the seeds from your own crops, then each generation theoretically is better adapted to your environment and should perform better. And Alison does this. So this is the 4th year of her collecting and reusing these seeds. And these are ones that she collected just a few days ago. So once you cover them in water, which isn't a huge amount of water, leave them for 4 days until the jelly has completely disappeared. Then you sieve it off, drain them, dry them, put them in an envelope and store them until next, probably February. Right. Ooh. Should give off a smell of fermenting, which this certainly does. Right, and then I'm just going to pour this over this chilli and water the chilli at the same time as sieving the seeds. So that's mostly cleared it. There is still a little bit of jelly on there though, so I'm going to just run it under the tap to clear. Clearly Rue has made himself a nest. I've rinsed these now, and I'm just going to put these on a plate and spread them out nice and evenly. And you could use kitchen towel if you wanted, but they can stick to that. So just a plate should be fine, as long as it's somewhere really dry. As soon as that is dried, envelope, label, and then store them somewhere cool and dark until the spring. It is lovely, especially when the rain is coming down, to find a job like this where you can do something a bit more unusual, but also you're really taking stock of the season. You'll only be choosing the tomatoes or whatever seed it is of the ones that performed well, so you're able to sort of pick something good to store and save for next year. And it's a really lovely little moment at the end of the summer. There we go. That is more than enough seeds for most gardens, just from 1 or 2 tomatoes. Now, this may not be quite a laboratory, but sometimes it's lovely to really understand plant science. And Nick is doing just that and taking a deep dive into plants' colours.
Flower colour. We spend a lot of time thinking about it. And we know the right palette of petals can transform a border. But floral colour isn't there for us. It's made to pull in pollinators. And for plants, creating it involves sophisticated chemistry and design.
These days, thanks to science, we're learning so much more about how plants make the colours in their petals. And it really is astonishing.
How we see colours, though, is a great bit of science in itself. Sunlight, or white light, is the key, because it's actually made up of lots of wavelengths, or different colours of light, and more.
Pigments in plants absorb some of the rainbow of light wavelengths that come down from the sun, but they bounce some of them back as well, and those are the colours that we see.
Depending on the type and shape of pigment, they'll absorb and reflect different colours.
This Rudbeckia absorbs all light wavelengths other than yellow, which it bounces back out, and that's why we see yellow. This aster down here absorbs all light wavelengths apart from this mauve, which it bounces back out. And the Lichnis over here absorbs all light except those pink tones, and that's why we see those colours.
Insects see colours differently to us, but they do recognise lots of them. And flowers use that as one way to lure in the pollinators. Professor Beverly Glover is director here at Cambridge University Botanic Garden and a specialist in how plants create colour.
It astounds me really, Beverly, that plants are able to make the ranges of colours we see from, it's basically just 2 key pigments, right?
Yeah, 2 key types of pigments. So we've got the carotenoids, which give us the oranges and yellows, that range of colours. And then we've got the anthocyanins, and those give us blue, purple, pink, through to red, lots of our common summer garden flowers. But actually that big diversity of colour comes from a much wider range of chemistry that plants can play with. Because in addition to those basic pigments, they can change the acidity of their cells, and that changes the colour the pigments look. And they can add metal ions into the pigments, and that changes, again, the colour that they absorb. And they can also use temperature as well to play a part. They're really just very clever chemists.
It really is extraordinary.
Even more amazing is that plants create that chemistry using just sunlight, air, water, and other elements they take from the soil. To illustrate the difference between how acid and alkali can affect petal colour, Beverly has set up an experiment with test tubes and a red cabbage.
Now, Beverly, I have done a few science experiments in my life, but rarely have they started with a cabbage.
Well, it's a great source of pigment. It's absolutely full of anthocyanin. And the more I chop it, the more of the cells I break open, and we should be able to get some of that pigment out into our bottle if we add some water.
It's amazing how quickly that kind of pigment comes out of the leaf.
And that's where red cabbage is a good thing to choose, because you just get so much pigment for not much starting material. So let's just put some of the liquid into a test tube. So we add some acid, which reduces the pH. I'm using a fairly dilute hydrochloric acid, so add it in.
But effectively, any acid would potentially trigger the shift?
Yeah, absolutely. So you could do this at home if you want to play with vinegar or with a lemon, but a squeeze of lemon juice would do the same trick. But you can see we've gone immediately through.
That is amazing.
And that's because as we change the number of hydrogen ions, basically, in the water, that changes the molecular makeup of the pigment, and that changes the wavelengths of light it absorbs.
So the colour pigment has literally shifted its form because of the acid?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And then
Okay.
because it's changed shape, it absorbs different wavelengths. So really quickly through to pink and fabulous colour. So let's have a look at what happens if we add an alkaline instead. This is sodium hydroxide. I'm using a dilute sodium hydroxide solution, but you could do the same at home with bicarbonate of soda from the baking shelf, would do the same job. And again, really quickly.
So fast, it's amazing.
We get that colour shift as the pigment changes.
And so the same thing is happening effectively. The shape of the pigment has shifted, and that's changed the way it's reacting with light and therefore the colour it's presenting.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary to see how flower pigments can change so quickly with a different pH in their petals. And it helps explain why there's a huge range of flower colours. But when it comes to how deep those colours are, some flowers use sunlight or white light and tiny microscopic detail on the surface of their petals to make the difference.
So, Beverly, we've got some snapdragons or antirrhinums, but what's going on with their colour?
So if you look at the back of the antirrhinum petals, you can see how the pigment's in there. It's in the cells are flat, and the white light arrives at them, and some of it passes into the cells, and the blue and the greens absorb so that you see the red colour, and some of it actually just bounces off, like light bouncing off tiles on a roof because it's a flat surface, and that light that bounces off dilutes the red that you can see a little bit, and so you get this sort of pinkish colour. But if you look at the front of the petal, that red colour is much more intense there. You can see how velvety it is, how rich, and yet it's the same pigment, it's the same set of cells. So on the front of the petal here, the cells are conical shaped, little pyramids, and they work like little lenses. And when white light arrives at those, it might still be bounced, but it's not going to be bounced straight back. It's going to be bounced sideways and into the next cell. It's like shining a little torch on it. And so more light ends up going into the cell, less white light diluting the effect, more light hitting the pigment, and so a deeper red colour.
So same pigment, just literally the shape is determining that it's a lighter or darker colour.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a trick of the light, really. The plant's using geometry to focus the light in and make sure it gets the maximum colour it possibly can from the same amount of pigment. It's really clever.
And that investment, of course, is to attract the attention of pollinators or anything flying by.
Some plants, though, need to really pull out the stops to be pollinated, especially if their flowers are muted or don't bloom for very long.
So this is the lovely hibiscus tree ornament, often known as flower of the hour, and I'm aware of that name. Basically, it just blooms in the morning, right? It's got a really short window, so I guess it's got to work really, really hard to pull in the pollinators.
All it's got really in its toolkit to attract pollinators is colour and how it looks. And the colour, it's fairly straightforward. We've got white petals, but they've got this central bullseye of dark red pigment. But actually, it's doing something even cleverer than that if you look really closely in full sun, because the centre of the flower has a system of very fine ridges and grooves on it that work just like this CD that I brought to show you. So if we move the CD around, you can see the different colours it produces, that iridescent effect. So that's, you know, blues, reds, yellows, and it's because the CD's got a system of ridges and grooves on the surface. That's the data grooves. And when the white light hits those, it's diffracted, and so different colours are reflected at different angles. So the blues all reflected one way, the reds another way, the green another way, and so on. And hibiscus here is doing exactly the same thing. And so if we look at the flower in the centre, on top of that red pigment, and I pull the petal back and move it around, you can see that that red actually has flashes of blue, particularly, and a bit of yellow on it as well. And that's because of a similar fine system of ridges and grooves, just like the CD, that are making it iridescent in the centre.
So it's almost like it's kind of hung a mirror ball in the middle and gone, look at me!
Yeah, absolutely. The flower's not there for very long. It needs to use as much bling as it possibly can to pull in pollinators, and it does that with this iridescent diffraction grating.
The fact that flowers can produce thousands of colour combinations is pretty astonishing. That they do some of that using chemistry and geometry is frankly mind-blowing.
It never ceases to amaze me just how clever plants are. And it's clear from Beverly's research, there's so much more to discover.
You know, we get so used to the plants around us, we don't even think about how they do what they do. And yet always, the more you learn, the more incredible you realise they are. I know that flowers have beautiful colours, but the colour green is also incredible, and not just one colour. When you look around, there are all sorts of different kinds of greens, and a lot of foliage-heavy plants are very happy in the shade. And this little corner of the garden here could be a little city garden. This might be the only space that you have, and it might be fairly shady, and yet this just shows, with a few containers and some lovely plants, you can get it looking really beautiful. This is Pilea Taiwan Silver, and it's got little streaks of whitish colours in them, and then there's the deep green of the ferns and the shiny green of hosta. That's actually called Devon green. But my favourite plant of this corner, one of my favourite plants actually in general, is this pelargonium. It's got lovely soft leaves that when you rub them have a really strong scent. This is scented leaf pelargonium. This has a sort of pepperminty smell, and it's very happy in the shade. And we are just coming to the end of when you can take your pelargonium cuttings, which is always a good idea because they're not fully hardy. So if you want to create some young plants that you can protect indoors over winter, just in case you lose the parent plants, now is your last chance to do so. You want to cut it just above a node. Having cut these off the parent plant, I'd probably put that somewhere frost-free for the rest of the winter. So all you need to do now is cut this to now just below the node. So cut it off from above for the health of the plant, but for the health of the cutting, I want to snip it again to just below the next node. And that's because this node, where the stalks come off, contains all the hormones that are currently telling the cells to be stem cells, but they can tell the cells to change and become root cells. And that is what we want them to be when they go under the compost. Then it's just a case of removing all the lower leaves. And then this is a very gritty compost because these like a very free draining soil. I will dib a hole right on the edge where there's going to be sunlight hitting the pot and creating heat, which will stimulate that growth. And once they're all in, I'll give that a water. Normally with cuttings, you might want to cover it with a plastic bag because they hold onto their moisture. But pelargoniums are really arid loving plants, and so I won't do that. I'll keep them in the open, allow really good ventilation. And if you find that you struggle with pelargonium cuttings, try putting them just in water. Just be aware that if they're growing in water and then going into compost, it can be a little bit of a shock. So a nice fine compost would be best for that. There we go. So that should be pretty happy. Make sure they have some bottom heat. So if you have a propagator or a heated bench or something like that, that will be perfect for this. Leave that indoors for probably the whole winter until you see roots coming out of the holes at the bottom. And then it's time to empty the whole pot, break up the cuttings and put each one in its own individual pot, harden it off, and then bring it out next year. And hopefully you'll have 3 or 4 new pelargoniums to either place everywhere in the garden or give to everyone you know, because they're really, really good plants. Creating new plants from cuttings is incredibly exciting, and so is creating a whole new garden, though it can be a little bit daunting. But one family in Kent rose to the challenge and created a garden with real significance.
Well, we moved in about 3 years ago. What we really wanted the garden to be was a place for us as a family, a place that sort of worked for Alice and I and for our young son, Arlen. He'd always shown, sort of from a young age, a love for nature. So the garden's really a space for Arlen to explore, and that's how it's been designed.
He loves pointing things out. What can you see?
Golden plum.
Just giving us all an opportunity to see the garden through his eyes.
There.
You can see his curiosity start to develop, and all he wants to do is allow you to be part of that. It's absolutely beautiful.
One flew away.
He did fly away. I'm Edmund.
And I'm Alice.
And this is our garden, and we live here with Arlen, our 3-year-old boy, and our puppy Rufus.
As soon as we moved in, the garden was pretty much a blanket wall of bindweed. You couldn't see much further than a couple of metres, so the first impression, sitting there and thinking, there is no way this will turn into a garden. You know, as the garden changed and the work was done, Edmund did create this wonderful space for us as a family. He did such a fabulous job, and at least now I get to have the most beautiful garden.
So the garden, by its nature, is long and thin. It's about 5 metres wide by about 30 metres long. And so to break that up, there are paths that wind through the garden and then very oversized beds, each of those punctuated by an amelanchier. And the idea is really that you can't see from one end to the other. Is to give that bit of an aura of mystery about it, particularly what I was looking for Arlen to explore. Then within these beds, there's consistent planting, sort of, and repeated planting. So there's a lot of lavender, we have a lot of Santolina, there's Stipa tenuissima, Haconocloa macra, and all of those are planted close to the edges of the paths to really soften the edges, but also so it creates a tactile sort of feel as you walk through. But the real wish that I wanted to get through was that feeling of natural abundance, so lush planting that really just pops.
In February 2024, our lives as a family completely changed. Arlen had had a seizure, which led us to seek further advice and information, and ending up with an MRI where we discovered a brain tumour. And very quickly, we were in an ambulance being blue lit for surgery as soon as possible. He was under for 9 hours, which is probably the hardest 9 hours of our lives. He had been diagnosed with a very rare and aggressive brain cancer called ATRT. Being told your child's got brain cancer, the world stops. You just suddenly cling on to hope. And it's hope out of everywhere and nowhere all at the same time.
So after surgery, Arlen underwent 8 months of intensive chemotherapy and proton beam therapy, where we were in hospital essentially for a week and then at home for a week. And during that time, we were all isolating together. The garden suddenly, it had a different meaning to us. It became our place of sanctuary, our place of refuge. We're never truly able to escape from what was going on, but there was an element that we were able to get away and to be sort of immersed within something that wasn't maybe as intense as everything else that was going on in our lives. And I think it allowed us to look to the future as well, sort of that idea of actually there is life, there is growth, there is positivity, there is wonder, and I think sort of all of that is stuff that we began to cling to, and we took that out of the garden, and that helped sort of motivate us, empower us.
So Arlen has now been in remission for almost a year, and throughout that time the garden has just continued to explode with life, and so has Arlen. He has his own section of the garden where he's able to use his mud kitchen, but everything's planted around him is able to be eaten.
Wow, that's a juicy one.
So he's currently got a kaleidoscope growing in there, he's got some random tomato seeds, and then he's got his strawberries. So he's just surrounded by things that he can eat, he can try, he can sort of mini harvest his own section and bring it into the house.
What have we got? Woodlice and slugs.
Whee!
It's just lovely to see the way he interacts with the garden, and it's different to how sort of we would, but that childhood wonder is, for us as parents, it's beautiful to look and see.
I found a spider.
Good job.
This is my favourite part of the garden, and it's where we get to grow the vegetables. I absolutely adore growing vegetables, especially ones that you wouldn't find in your local supermarket. Arlen and I together, we bring it to life from the start, from seed all the way to a harvest.
There.
Okay?
Now we see.
We do, we need seeds. We've got some beautiful things this year. We've got a yellow star courgette, which we really love the nutty flavour of it. A purple French bean variety called Cossé Violette, and we've got a couple of heirloom tomatoes. This is so special because myself and Arlen love to cook, and we get to have fresh vegetables that we pick together as a family, enjoying the journey with Arlen. To be able to harvest something beautiful, full of flavour, just brings absolute joy to all of us.
The garden continues to provide, yes, sanctuary, hopefully sort of no longer solace, but more hope.
Arlen now has a chance to see what gardens are and how they can really just capture the imagination. Arlen lights up when he's here. The garden is somewhere that just brings a smile to his face, and that brings joy to us all.
That is such a lovely example of how our gardens really can be that caring space when we all need it from time to time. And incidentally, that is an absolutely beautiful garden. I love this garden now, Alison. It's looking so beautiful. I love the Calamagrostis brachytricha.
Yeah, that's a really good duo. It doesn't seem to mind the drought.
I grow this one and it also loves the wet because I get quite a lot of that.
Yeah.
So it seems to be a really resilient plant.
Yeah.
But it also picks up all the purple eupatorium. Those colours really offset each other so well. It's really beautiful.
Looking at it now, though, at this time of year, I'm just sort of reassessing these beds a little bit, and it feels like there needs to be just one or two other things just to lift it a little bit. This is a Sanguisorbitana, the low Sanguisorba, which is great as an edging plant, but does tend to like a bit of moisture. So if we're going to get more of these intensely hot summers, I was thinking about swapping one of these out for another aster, which I think might cope with the drier conditions.
All right, well, let's start with digging that one out. Shall I cut it back because it saves the plant from going into shock?
Yeah.
Hopefully it shouldn't now it's autumn. It's the perfect time to be moving things.
Yes, exactly.
This is the aster you wanted here, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is Aster lutetia. It's quite a small one. It's about 40 centimetres high, so it's really good for the front of the border. And it's also got quite a loose habit, so it has kind of quite a naturalistic feel about it.
Do you think 3?
Yes, I mean, you could just plant one and wait for it to bulk up.
Well, I think if you're buying them small like this, it's nice to get a few.
Yeah.
And you'll probably still spend less than if you got one big, massive pot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will let you place them how you want them because this is the front of your bed and you're going to be the one who looks at it.
Okie dokie, yeah.
This is the perfect time after a summer of observation to begin rejigging your herbaceous borders. But it is also exactly the right time of the year to enjoy your harvest.
I have always found so much joy in growing my own fruit and veg, and this year I have been showing you how I sow it, how I grow it, and how I get to cook with it. And just because the seasons are changing, it doesn't have to end right now.
The nights are now drawing in, it's getting cooler, but the plot is still looking great. I've got chard. I've been growing this, harvesting it, and it still keeps giving. And that has really brought a smile to my face. Another one that is really good is the maize. And I've got leeks. And I've got so many things still to come out. And I've still got a few things to sow. But that's the whole joy of a garden. Once one season ends, the next one wakes up. The garden doesn't sleep for me. It just carries on parting.
And it's still not too late to join in that party. The choices might be fewer now, but with the soil still holding on to that last bit of summer warmth, it's the perfect time to pop in a few final seeds.
I am quite excited to sow this one. It's called cauliflower sprouting, Delhi stem white, and I've never sown this before. To sow these seeds, I'm using these little seed trays. They are about 5 centimeters deep, and most seeds require that depth for the root to go down. And so just fill it up with some seed compost, this is. It's quite fine rather than multi-purpose. And then tamp it down. Now, the reason why I tamp this down is so that I get a level base, and that way, when they do germinate, they'll all germinate at the same time. Right, so now the seeds, I will sow them in a row, spacing of about 1 centimetre or so. They're not touching each other, and it helps when it comes to pricking them out when I'm potting them on. Okay, I'm just gonna sieve it over. By watering above, I might dislodge the seed and take it to the edges of the seed tray. So I much prefer to put this into a tray of water.
It's not too late to sow a few herbs either. At this time of the year, coriander and dill will do well, but I'm going for parsley. It's slow to get going, but it's tough once it does. Give it a little protection indoors to start with, and when the seedlings get to about 7 to 8 centimeters tall, they'll sit quite happily in the plot, alongside another one of my early autumn favorites, garlic.
These are my own grown garlic. It's called Rhapsody. I have only selected the biggest ones to plant out. In this space, I had my main crop potatoes. The soil is still good. It's got plenty of leaf mold still in there. Leaf mold has a really good moisture retaining quality, but it's also free draining. Garlic likes that. What I'm doing right now is carefully taking away each clove from the bulb, but I'm making sure that I've still got the base or plate that it was attached to originally. Now that these are ready, I am going to plant them 5 centimeters deep and 10 centimeters apart. Within the allium family, be it garlic, onions, chives, leeks, they like free draining soil. So it could be a pot, it could be a plot. It has to be free draining soil. You plant them in the autumn, you harvest them midsummer. This really is a good crop to grow. It doesn't need any attention. Give them a weed here and there in the spring months. That's it. But it's all about the flavor. I can't even tell you how much joy I get using my own garlic in the kitchen. I use it almost every day.
It's been such a dry summer, but the recent rain has brought the garden back to life, ready for the season finale. The last of the courgettes and squash are ready for picking, and the tail end of the tomatoes are ripening rapidly. All the colors, all the flavors, and all ready for one of my end of summer favorites, chutney. This one uses a mix of whatever's ready in the garden: tomatoes, courgettes, chilies, onions, with vinegar, sugar, and a few warming spices from the cupboard. It all goes into one big pot, and then it's just a matter of stirring and waiting while it bubbles away. The trick is not to rush it. If you don't give it time, it'll stay watery. Just let it thicken slowly. It's worth the wait.
Summer may be over, but I have captured the flavors of the summer season. When we open these jars in winter, that's when we'll be thankful of the season we've just had. That is the best thing homegrown can give you.
Rekha is totally right that you have to really try and preserve things for as long as you can, especially when there is a glut. And right now here, there is a bit of a glut of these. They are cucamelons, so named because they are sort of like a cross between a cucumber and a melon in the same family, but they really do taste like a cucumber, only much smaller. And they're really good when they're pickled. So for the pickle, there's some star anise in there, some mustard seeds, some dill, and a chopped chilli for a little bit of heat. And then I just add the cucamelons on top until the jar is nearly full. Now obviously I've got cucamelons, but you may not have them, but if you have things like shallots or onions or cucumbers or gherkins, bulb fennel, all of those things can be pickled, even things like cabbage. So it's just really whatever you fancy. And the same with the spices, you could use any that you like. Cloves are quite good, cinnamon, cardamom maybe. So just try different things. And on top of that, I'm just going to pour a vinegar syrup. So this is apple cider vinegar mixed with sugar and then heated up until the sugar has completely dissolved. And now it's cooled back down to room temperature. So it's ready to pour over the whole mix. It's really important that you make sure everything's covered, because if it's sticking up out of the vinegar, it's exposed to the air and has more of a chance of beginning to go a bit bad. Seal it up and go give that a bit of a shake. And then put this in the fridge for a couple of weeks until the flavours have infused. Then you can start eating them. And if you keep them in the fridge, they should last for a good few months. Actually looks very pretty, doesn't it? That's a nice job to do at this time of year. But there are plenty of other things that you can be doing this weekend. Now is a good time to be thinking ahead to summer colour. And Californian poppies are a great choice for a dry, sunny spot. They're easy to grow, but because they don't like having their roots disturbed, it's best to sow them directly where you want them to flower. If your soil or gravel is very compacted, just lightly loosen the surface and then simply sprinkle the seed thinly. If you have grown beans, such as barlotti or kidney beans, they'll be ready to harvest once the pods have started to turn brown and papery. Pick them on a dry day and then shell the beans. Spread them out on a tray and leave in a warm spot for at least a week. Once they're totally dry, they can be stored for many months. Plants such as alchemilla, erigeron and wild strawberry can do a lovely job of softening the edges of paths, but if you don't keep on top of them, they can quite quickly take over. For gravel paths, the simplest way is to dig them out with a small trowel, taking out as much root as you can. You can move them somewhere else or pot them up to give to family and friends. I couldn't come to Damson Farm and not pick some damsons when they're in season. And these ones are perfectly ripe. You can tell when they go ever so slightly soft and obviously start to taste delicious rather than a little bit sour. Now, I suspect a lot of us will have a real glut of fruit this year because the warm spring meant lots of pollinators were out and about. And if that happens, you can freeze these. You can just stick them in as they are, or you can stew them and freeze them as a sort of compote. Incidentally, they also make a really good pigment, so you can dye some fabric with them if you want to use them in that way. Now, Monty is back at Longmeadow in a few weeks' time. But in the meantime, I think I have plenty to keep me busy here. See you soon.